There are moments when silence feels louder than words, when your heart screams for answers and heaven seems sealed. You cry, but no one hears. You fall, and no one notices. You reach out, and nothing reaches back. In those moments, you begin to wonder, did even God abandon you? But what if behind that silence, something was happening? What if every tear you shed was counted, every breath you took in pain was recorded, and every time you almost gave up, someone held you together from the inside out? This is a story of a soul on the edge, broken, hopeless, and lost in a world that forgot him. And the message waiting for him, a divine whisper that said, I never gave up on you. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. Not outside, and not inside Samuel's heart. He sat alone in his one-bedroom apartment, the lights dim, the air heavy with unspoken defeat. Around him, unopened bills and shut-off notices littered the floor. The echo of his own breathing was the only sound that comforted him anymore. His phone hadn't rung in weeks. Friends disappeared like mist in sunlight when his luck turned. Job gone, family silent. The world, it seemed, had voted him out. There was a time he used to pray. Really pray. He would look up with eyes wide and hopeful, like a child waiting for their father's answer. But lately nothing came. The heavens were shut. He clenched his jaw, staring at the mold-stained wall. Where are you now? He whispered, his voice hoarse. Where were you when I needed you? Tears burned his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He had cried too many times. They solved nothing. The clock struck 3 a.m., that hour when shadows stretch and loneliness deepens into something that tastes like despair. He stood, legs unsteady, and walked toward the window. Outside, the streetlights flickered like they, too, were about to give up. He had one last letter in his trembling hands, a notice of eviction. He had 3 days left before the only thing he had, a roof, would be gone. He turned and stared at the empty room behind him. Maybe this is it, he muttered. Maybe this is how I'm supposed to go. Quietly, forgotten. But as he walked back, something strange happened. His radio, long unplugged and untouched, suddenly crackled to life. Samuel froze. He stared at it. It made no sense. The dial turned by itself, slowly, landing on a station filled with static, and then a voice. Soft, gentle, deep. I never gave up on you. His heart dropped. He blinked. The voice wasn't familiar, but it wasn't unfamiliar either. It was comforting, like an embrace from the inside. He inched closer to the radio. What did you say? No answer. Just static again. Then silence. He stood frozen. That voice, those words, they struck something in him. Something that hadn't stirred in a long time. Hope. He looked around. Nothing else had moved. No wind. No signs of anyone else. Was I hallucinating, he thought. Going crazy? But his chest felt different, like warmth had seeped through the cracks in his soul. That night, Samuel didn't sleep. He stayed by the radio, waiting, hoping, and something inside him whispered again, not from the device, but from his own being, a voice too gentle to ignore. Get up tomorrow. Walk. Just walk. It wasn't a command. It wasn't even clear, but it gave him a reason to rise. So at sunrise, with nothing in his stomach but faith, Samuel put on his torn shoes and stepped outside. The morning air was cold, but he felt something new brushing against his skin, purpose. He wandered the streets, unsure where to go, just walking. And as he passed a bookstore, a sign in the window caught his eye, looking for part-time help. Must have heart. He blinked. Was this the coincidence? He hesitated, then stepped in. The store was warm, filled with the scent of old paper and soft jazz playing from a speaker. A woman behind the counter looked up. She smiled. Looking for something? He held up the sign. Is this still open? Her smile widened. Yes, and you're the first to ask. Within an hour, Samuel had a job. Small hours, minimum pay. But it was something. It was hope. Over the next few days, he worked quietly, shelving books, sweeping corners, and soaking the quiet company of pages and possibilities. Every now and then, he would hear a whisper, not out loud, but within. I am with you. You're not alone. I never left. He stopped questioning it. The more he leaned in, the more alive he felt, the more the noise of the world faded, and the voice within grew louder. On his 7th day at the shop, a customer walked in, a frail old man with eyes that carried galaxies. He walked straight to Samuel and said, "You've been in a storm, haven't you?" Samuel was stunned. "Aye, yeah. How did you know?" The man smiled gently. God has strange ways of pulling us from the fire. He doesn't shout. He whispers. Then he handed Samuel a small book. No title, no author, just a plain black cover. "Read this when you're ready," the man said, and then walked out. Samuel stared at the book. The pages inside were blank. All of them, until the very last one. It read, "You were never alone. I was always watching. Even in the silence, I was holding you together. I never gave up on you." His knees buckled. He sat on the floor of the shop, the book in his hands, tears streaming down his face. Not out of pain this time, but release. He didn't understand how or why, but he knew God had found him in the darkness, not through thunder, not through miracles, but through a whisper, a nudge, a stranger, and a blank book. That night, as he walked home, the sky opened, but not with rain, with stars. He looked up and whispered, "I almost gave up," and deep within him, the voice answered, "But I didn't." Samuel's journey was only just beginning. The world hadn't changed overnight, but he had. What do you do when God doesn't speak the way you expect? What if the silence isn't absence, but preparation? And what if, all along, in the moments you felt most forgotten, you were actually being shaped for something greater? Sometimes what looks like a coincidence is actually a divine alignment. Sometimes what feels like a detour is the road you were always meant to take. When you think you're wandering aimlessly, heaven might be guiding your every step. Samuel had no idea how to whisper a single voice in a mysterious book with blank pages would spark the beginning of a transformation. But what God starts, he doesn't leave unfinished. The question now was Samuel ready to walk the rest of the path? A week passed since Samuel first heard that strange, sacred whisper crackle through his radio. Each morning, he still expected it to have been a dream. But every time he stepped outside, breathed in the morning air, and looked up at the sky, he felt it. Something had changed. The world still moved fast. Bills still came. His shoes were still torn. But his spirit, it was no longer crumbling. At the bookstore, Samuel worked silently and with care, as if every book held a hidden message just for him. He began to notice things, small, quiet blessings. The way a child's laughter filled the room like sunlight. The comfort of warm coffee offered without a reason. A gentle pat on the back from his boss who once barely noticed him. They weren't miracles in the eyes of the world. But to a man who had been walking in emotional darkness, these little lights felt like stars being born. And the blank book, that strange black book with only a single message, never left his side. He carried it with him like a lifeline. Some days he'd open it, hoping for more words. It never changed. Still, the message echoed in his soul. You were never alone. I never gave up on you. One rainy afternoon, as he was showing a collection of spiritual classics, a familiar voice startled him. You didn't expect it to rain today, did you? Samuel turned. The old man who had given him the book was standing there again, umbrella dripping at the door. Samuel blinked. You came back? The old man smiled. I never really left. There was something strange about him, timeless, almost translucent, as if he was part of another realm, but just barely visible in this one. I read the book, Samuel said, but there's nothing in it except the last page. That's where the truth begins, the man said softly. Words can be spoken 1,000 times and still mean nothing. But the word of God, when it's for you, will pierce your very soul. You needed just one word to change your life. Samuel was quiet. Why now? Why did God reach out now, and not when I was at my worst? The old man's eyes glimmered. You think that voice came now? Samuel, it was always there. You just stopped listening. Those words hit like thunder. He thought back, back to the endless nights of self-pity, of anger, of bitterness. He had prayed, yes, but also doubted. He had begged, yes, but also cursed. He had built walls so high, not even a miracle could pass through. And yet, grace found him anyway. The old man walked closer. Pain clouded the voice of heaven. But when you become still, truly still, you begin to hear what was always there. Samuel swallowed hard. But what now? I have nothing. I still can't afford rent. My life's still a mess. The man looked at him with an expression both kind and fierce. You have everything, because you are not forgotten, because he said so. Then the man leaned closer and whispered, God doesn't need perfect conditions to bless you. He only needs your surrender. He turned and walked out the door once again. Samuel didn't follow. He didn't have to. That night, the rain fell again. Not the same kind. This one was soft, steady, almost cleansing. Samuel sat by his window, watching the water streak down the glass like silver threads. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like the storm was against him. He felt like it was washing something away. He knelt beside his bed, not out of ritual, but from a deep longing. I don't have fancy words, he whispered. I don't even know what to say. But I'm here. I'm listening. And in that quiet room, the stillness was holy. There was no booming voice, no thunder from heaven, just a warmth in his chest, a weight lifting, a peace deeper than anything he had felt in years. In the days that followed, more things began to unfold. Small things, subtle alignments. A woman walked into the shop one morning, frantic, searching for a rare book for her daughter's hospital recovery. Samuel happened to know where it was. He even wrapped it without being asked. Tears welled in her eyes. I needed this more than you know. Thank you. She left her car with him. Turned out she ran a support center for people dealing with job loss, grief, and depression. You ever want to volunteer? She said. We'd be lucky to have someone like you. Samuel kept her card. Another afternoon, the bookstore owner called him aside. You've changed, she said. You smile now. People notice. I decided to increase your hours. And your pay. It wasn't much, but it was more than he had. And each step forward felt like a divine breadcrumb, leading him out of the wilderness. But not everything was smooth. One evening, as he returned home, he found a notice pinned to his door. His landlord wasn't extending the lease. He had 10 days to leave. He stared at the paper, heart pounding. The fear threatened to return, like a wave he thought had passed. But something inside him had grown stronger. He walked to the table, opened the blank book, stared at the single page, and whispered, You didn't bring me this far to abandon me now. And the wind outside seemed to whisper back through cracks in the wall, Trust me. So he did something strange. He packed his things calmly. He called the woman from the support center and told her he was ready to volunteer. She was overjoyed. Then, 3 days before he had to move, she called him back. There's a guest house behind our center. One of our volunteers moved out suddenly. Would you be interested? It's small, but it's clean and affordable. Samuel was speechless. 2 days later, he moved in. That night, he stood in the tiny room, no furniture but a mattress, and fell to his knees. Tears streamed again, not out of sorrow but gratitude. Thank you, he whispered. Even when I had nothing, you were working. Even when I was faithless, you were faithful. And in his heart, the whisper returned, clearer than ever. I never gave up on you. Not once. When Samuel was drowning, God was already parting the sea. When he saw no way out, heaven was preparing the door. All it took was a whisper, and a wounded soul ready to listen. But the story isn't over. Not yet. What happens when a man who was once broken becomes a voice for others who are still trapped in their storms? What happens when grace, once received, must now be given? Healing is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a higher calling. When God restores, he doesn't just mend the broken. He sends him to be a light in someone else's darkness. Samuel thought the voice of God came just to save him. But what he didn't realize was that heaven had far greater plans. This is the final chapter, and it's about purpose, redemption, and a voice that never stops speaking. It had been 3 months since Samuel moved into the guest house behind the support center. 3 months since he stopped looking at life like a punishment and started seeing it as a mission. Every morning he woke up early, swept the small yard, and whispered a short prayer, not for miracles anymore, but for strength, for wisdom, for someone else. He volunteered daily at the center, listening to stories that felt eerily like his own. People who had lost homes, jobs, loved ones. He didn't give advice. He didn't preach. He just listened. And then, when the time was right, he shared pieces of his own story, not to impress, but to connect. And slowly, people began to change around him, not because of anything grand, but because someone saw them, heard them, believed with them. One rainy evening, a woman named Tara came into center, eyes swollen, arms trembling. She barely spoke, only whispered, "I don't know why I'm here. I just felt like I needed to be." Samuel recognized the pain instantly. It was like staring into his past. He gave her warm tea, sat in silence beside her, handed her a notepad. "I used to write when I couldn't speak," he said softly. "Sometimes the soul needs a different language." She didn't write much, just one sentence. "Why does God let people drown?" Samuel looked at her, eyes gentle. "He doesn't," he said. "But sometimes he lets the waves rise, just enough to show you how to walk on water." Tara blinked through tears. "But what if I don't believe anymore?" "Then he'll believe for you," Samuel replied, "until you're strong enough to believe again." She broke down, and for the first time in years, Samuel wasn't the one crying in the corner. He was the one holding someone else together. That night, he sat in his room and opened the black book again. Still blank, except the last page. Still the same words. "You were never alone. I never gave up on you." He traced the letters with his finger and whispered, "Now I understand." Weeks passed. The support center grew. More people came in. Samuel began organizing a small weekly group, a circle of strangers turned family. He didn't call it therapy. He called it the table. Because everyone deserves a seat, he told them, no matter what they've lost, no matter how messy their story is. And word spread. People started arriving not just from the town, but nearby cities. Some came with doubts. Others came with nothing but hope, but all left with something more. Then one day, something unexpected happened. Samuel was called into the director's office. "We're opening a new branch," she said. "We need someone to lead it. Someone who understands pain. Someone who's been there." Samuel's heart raced. "I'm no pastor," he said. "I'm no counselor. I don't even have a degree." She smiled. "We don't need a degree. We need you." At that moment, every doubt he ever had came crashing down. The voices of the past, those that told him he was worthless, forgotten, broken, began to scream again. But beneath them, one voice remained steady. Clear, the same voice that had whispered in the night when he was at his lowest. "I never gave up on you." He took a deep breath and nodded. "I'll do it." The new center opened 2 months later, in a rundown part of a nearby town. The building was old, the paint peeling, the floors creaking, but it had something sacred inside it. Samuel brought the black book and placed it on the front desk. Still blank, still holy. He didn't hide his past. He made it the foundation. On the wall, he wrote in bold letters, "There is no shame in falling, only in refusing to rise." People came, and as they walked through the doors, they didn't just find shelter. They found a story they could belong to. One evening, a teenage boy named Malik stumbled in, bleeding from the forehead, fists clenched, eyes defiant. "Don't touch me," he shouted. Samuel didn't flinch. He walked over, slowly, and sat down across from him. "I've been where you are," he said. "I wanted to fight the world too." Malik glared. "Why are you acting like you know me?" "I don't," Samuel said. "But I know the pain that brought you here. I know what it feels like to think no one sees you." The boy stared for a long time. Then his shoulders dropped. He cried, for what he claimed was the first time in 5 years. And Samuel whispered, "You're not alone. You never were." One day, as he was locking up, Samuel noticed something strange. The black book, the one that had been blank all this time, was no longer blank. New words had appeared on the second-to-last page. "Well done, my servant. You heard me. You followed. Now others hear through you." Samuel trembled. Tears slipped down his face. It wasn't just a message. It was a promise. Every moment he had felt abandoned. Every time he thought the silence meant rejection. It had all been preparation. God had never left. He had simply waited for Samuel to become ready. And now, Samuel had become more than a survivor. He had become a messenger. Your story is not over. The pain you carry, the wounds you hide, they are not the end. They may be the very reason someone else finds hope. God doesn't just rescue. He repurposes. He doesn't just heal. He sends. And when the world writes you off, he writes your name on the palm of his hand. Samuel's journey started with silence. Then came the whisper. Then came the calling. And now it's your turn to listen. Whatever storm you're in, whatever emptiness you're facing, there's a voice, still and steady, waiting for your attention. You were never alone. I never gave up on you. God says, I still haven't, and I never will.